Hey guys, how's it going? It is your boy, Manga Drew, and I'm here to do my breakdown for My Hero Academia Season 6, Episode 18. And this was a very important episode because we learned a lot about One for All and the Vestiges and what's going to be happening in the near future for My Hero Academia. So let's dive more into this breakdown and see what's going on. So for starters, the title of this episode is Izuku Midoriya and Tomura Shigaraki. This title actually comes from chapters 305, as well as this episode covers chapters 304 and 306. And the episode actually begins with some reused scenes that we've seen from the previous episode, as well as a reused scene where we get the rainbow transition into the world of One for All. And as we enter this world, we get to see a full view of all of the vestiges from the first user all the way up to the most recent user inside the vestige world, as we get to hear all of them speak for the first time together. And from here, this is where we get to learn a little bit more about One for All in this episode, as well as we get to see Deku learning about One for All at the same time. Because after the intro, we cut over to learning a little bit more about One for All and how the vestiges inside of One for All were able to communicate after what happened during the war, and how their communication began around 4 months prior, around the time Deku unlocked Black Whip. And this is very important information because now, due to the thanks of All for One allowing them to be able to communicate with each other more frequently, they were able to convey a lot more information to each other, which is allowing us to learn more about One for All. And when it comes to this world, as Deku is learning more about One for All, there is a cool way that they're able to demonstrate that Deku is unable to speak in this world, which cannot be fully translated from how it was done in the manga. In the manga, he has this broken up speech where you can see it in the actual anime via the Japanese subs, but they also add a filter over his voice to imply that even though he's able to speak, he cannot actually use his mouth to do so, so it is actually distorted and not clearly being stated. So I really like how the anime is able to add these things from what we get with the manga to fit with the medium of the anime. And as we also get the title drop of this episode, this is where we're finally properly introduced to the fourth user of One for All. We are introduced to what his name is, which is Kage Shinomori, and he is voiced by a very prominent voice actor in Japan by the name of Toshiyuki Morikawa, who voices very famous characters such as Julius from Black Clover, Ishin from Bleach, and Kaguya from Kimetsu no Yaiba. And he does an amazing job as the voice actor for this character in this episode, and most likely for the rest of this series, especially when it comes to his first introduction as one of the users of One for All in this episode. And this is really important because we do get some added, or should I say changed scenes, where we get a little bit more about the character of the fourth user. Where we do get to see his fun interaction with Banjo when he is able to sort of kind of in a way, where he's able to show off his quirk of danger sense in a very more comedic way, which really adds to his character that is not necessarily in the manga, as well as the added and changed scene, adding a little bit more humor to this character who seems to be very stoic from first appearance. And with the help of Hikage, we actually get a little bit more of the lore of what One for All is and how it actually functions. And in this episode, we learn a little bit more about, because of the fact that One for All has grown to the point that it is right now, it cannot be passed on to normal people, aka people with quirks. We also learned that through the help of communication and information gained from the All Might vestige inside of One for All, that Hikage actually died of old age, which leads to the idea that this quirk can sap the life force of people with quirks. But along that line, we also learn a little bit more about how All Might is able to be in this world of the vestiges even though he was quirkless, and that it is because One for All did become his quirk, and therefore he can pass on his consciousness into this One for All vestige world. And how this all leads into the idea that Deku may be the final user of One for All, and how the iconic scene in the manga is translated extremely well into the anime. And with that, we really transfer over from the content that is in chapter 304 to the chapter that was in 305, where we get the crux of the title of this chapter, and where Deku is confronted by Nana Shimura with the idea of having to kill Tomura Shigaraki. And for the most part, we do get to see Nana Shimura really question Deku's resolve when it comes to his ideals and whether or not he can kill Tomura. and how we do get a little bit more emphasis on the fact that All For One's goal was to try and take over Tomura Shigaraki's body to eventually get his hands on One For All. And it's from that moment of learning a little bit more about One For All is when we learn a little bit more about the 6th user of One For All in. And this is where we get the more proper introduction of the 6th user in, who is actually voiced by Tetsuya Kakihara, who has voiced anime characters such as Natsu from Fairy Tail. So In is introduced in this episode, but we do get a little bit more information about All For One and what he has done to the previous users of One For All. And when it comes to All For One, the episode, from my opinion, seems to specifically confirm that All For One did attempt to take the quirk of One For All from the 2nd and the 3rd user, and that this implication seems to be a little bit more clearer in the anime than it is in the manga, and that this is most likely the case with information that we learned in the manga later on. So it's cool that we got that a little bit earlier than we thought when it comes to All For One wanting to take the quirk of One For All from certain users of One For All. And once again, we do have Nana once again trying to confirm whether or not Deku has the ability to kill Tomura Shigaraki, to which we do have Deku beginning to give his response to Nana and to kind of emphasize his resolve. And when it comes to Deku and his resolve and responding to Nana Shimura, there may be an actual anime error in this episode, and it pertains to the shadow around Deku's mouth. And that is the fact that we actually see Deku's mouth, but in this scene, he is actually still speaking in a distorted tone. Which makes sense because in the manga, we do not actually get the clarification of his voice until the shadow completely leaves his face for a scene to come. So I think this may be an error on the anime's part that may actually be fixed in the Blu-ray. And even after that era, we do get a little bit more of Deku's resolve when it comes to him remembering his foes, as well as his resolve to not necessarily kill Tomura Shigaraki because the quirk of One For All was not meant to kill, but meant to save, as taught to him by All Might. And from there, we do get to see a memorial of All Might as we see different images of younger characters appearing on the screen, which is in the manga. However, some of these scenes are actually cut from this panel in the anime in comparison to what was in the manga. And going from there, this is where we get the resolve for Deku to begin to understand that he does not need to kill Tomura Shigaraki necessarily. And this is the moment where Deku's mouth is supposed to be revealed and his clarification in his speech becomes clear, as his voice goes from being distorted back to his normal voice as he declares that he is going to be the one to at least make an attempt to save Tomura Shigaraki. We do get a similar transition of him turning into a smaller version or his kid self, but the transition is a little bit wonky in the anime, and how we are later learning that this was all a test to see if Deku was actually worthy to be an actual successor for One For All. So all the stuff that we got in the Vestige world was pretty much amazing and was pretty much pulled one for one from what was in the manga and put into the anime, which is something that you can ask no more or no less of when it comes to an anime adaptation. And as we are approaching more towards the end of this episode and approaching our material in chapter 306, we return to the real world where All Might is confronted by both Best Jeanist and Hawks to talk to him about One For All. Where we have a slight change from the manga where we see that the students are actually trying to look to see if Deku is alright, and how this change is really not that major. But what is major is that All Might begins to reveal the secret of One For All to both Hawks and Best Jeanist. And from there, we actually get narration that is actually done by the voice actor of Uraraka, explaining the situation as we see it, starting from talking about the disasters that were going on into the press release where we see that Endeavor, Hawks, and Best Jeanist are beginning to talk to the reporters. And this is where the heroes themselves convey information to the audience themselves watching the anime, as well as to the other individuals within the world of My Hero Academia about what is going on after the war. For starters, Endeavor confirms his relationship to Dobby and apologizes for whatever Dobby has done. Hawks reveals that the information that they learned about Best Jeanist as well as himself is true when it comes to him having a villainous father, and him taking the life of the villain twice, aka Jin Bubugawara, and how he regrets that he had to do it, but that he thought that he needed to do it to make sure that less damage would occur. And finally, we had Best Jeanist reveal the idea that they're going to be working as hard as they possibly can and start protecting easier by having people go to certain hero schools like UA to act as shelters. And while the heroes get this information out, we have a reporter who is trying to edge on and try to confront the heroes about their poor showing during the war. And something I want to bring up that you may not notice in the manga is that she does most likely have a heteromorphic quirk on her left hand because her fingers are completely different on one hand than they are on another. But even when it comes to her spite, Endeavor is able to come up and ask the people to put all of the burden on him as he repeats a line that he said during the Pro Hero arc where he is asking everyone to just watch him. And how this moment leads to a small added scene of Watch looking at Endeavor's declaration on his phone, as well as we get to see some heroes that we've known beginning to take on more of the ideals of what was placed upon them by both Endeavor and All Might, as the idea of what it means to be a hero is gone, but a new one is about to be put in its place. And as the episode begins to come to an end, we end the episode once again on Uraraka in her narration as it is revealed to us as well as the students that Deku has left UA, where we do get some added scenes of the students reacting to letters that Deku has left to all of them explaining what is going on, as well as we hear Deku narrating over and reading the letters we are assuming each one of the students have, as well as once again added scenes to see all the reactions of the students in this moment reading Deku's letter, and how we are able to see all of their reactions except for Aoyama. And this is going to come back and play a major role later on in the story, so you're just going to have to watch and make sure you pay attention for when this scene eventually comes back up. And this scene pretty much ends with Uraraka questioning Deku's decision as we transfer from a black screen filled with rose petals to Deku standing over a destroyed city, as it is confirmed that we are in the final act. So yeah, this is my episode breakdown for My Hero Academia Season 6, Episode 18. So, what'd you think of the episode? Did you like it? Did you dislike it? And was there anything that I missed in this breakdown? Leave your thoughts down in the comments down below, leave a like on the video if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit that notification bell to be notified whenever I upload more content like this. Do all that cool jazz, and hopefully I'll be able to catch you in my next video. Goodbye!